we're getting a very notable boomlet of kind of love and adulation for Kamala Harris right now. I don't know how long that's going to last. Maybe it's a sugar high and we're going to crash pretty soon, or maybe she's able to sustain it for something like close to 100 days.
You're listening to the USSC Briefing Room, a podcast from the United States Study Center at the University of Sydney, where we give you a seat at the table for a USSC briefing on the latest developments in US news and foreign policy. We'll cover what you need to know and what's beneath the surface of the news.
Hello, I'm Victoria Cooper, non-resident fellow at the United States Study Center. Thanks for joining us on the USSC Briefing Room podcast today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're recording on. University of Sydney is located on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Well, it's been another whirlwind week of US politics, with President Joe Biden deciding to no longer seek a second term of his presidency and passing the reins on to Vice President Kamala Harris. With so many changes, what will this all mean for the 2024 presidential election? What will it mean for Kamala Harris's future campaign? What are her strengths and weaknesses? How does she compare head-to-head against Donald Trump? All of these questions, we need answers to be able to interpret recent events. So to discuss these things, I'm joined by non-resident fellow Lester Munson and senior non-resident fellow Bruce Wolpe. Lester, were you surprised when Biden announced that he was no longer running for president?
No. I mean, he clearly, I've been thinking he's going to have to say something like that for a long time, but that doesn't reduce the shock factor of the president withdrawing from the race and effectively handing the reins of his party to the vice president. You kind of remember where you were and who you were with when that happened. This is a big deal. And I do think it was inevitable. I don't think he was going to be able to run. But it's still shocking. So I'm not surprised, but shocked. Is that fair?
That's exactly how I felt, Lester. The political logic was inescapable. He could not win from where he was. There was no path to victory. And it took 3 weeks for him to understand it, for his staff to bring it to him, and for him to make a decision. And it is one of the hardest things in public life. I mean, politicians care about, what they stand for, but they care about their ego. And we just don't see this. When I thought John Meacham's column in the New York Times was right. George Washington stood aside in the 1790s in order to show we didn't have a king, we had presidents. And it's just not often at all when leaders at the highest level say, it's time for me to go. And so this was a really big deal. And then I think we can enjoy as being here, living in an unprecedented moment. And it's unprecedented how many times we use the word unprecedented to describe where we are in American politics.
Well, Bruce, I will tell you. So in 1968, LBJ in March announced he was not going to run for re-election. I was 6 months old. I checked with my dad. I was watching TV then. So I did have this weird sense of deja vu. No, I'm kidding. I didn't have a sense of deja vu, but I did feel like some sort of spiritual connection to the first full year of my life, which was 1968.
I was a little older. I did watch it. It was a complete stunner at the end of the speech.
That's right.
And I've remembered the words verbatim in the decades since. And but this was later in the cycle. The New Hampshire primary had occurred in 1968. Eugene McCarthy was in there and scared him in New Hampshire. Bobby Kennedy decided to get in the race. And then Johnson looking at the landscape and then figure out what he wanted to do. And also to pass the burning torch, if it was, to Hubert Humphrey to carry the campaign. And Humphrey almost won. He almost won. So people wonder whether Harris, who inherits the political landscape that Biden was in on the economy and immigration, we'll talk about those issues. Can she, after the excitement wears off, can she really go forward? But anyway, these are amazing days, and it's really something to see.
I guess that's the big question then, is it that Kamala Harris has now inherited a burning torch? Are we looking at another 1968 sort of situation where we're subbing out Kamala Harris to Hubert Humphrey? Is disaster incoming? I mean, I guess that's the kind of broader question is, did Biden resign because the political landscape meant that his campaign was untenable, or was it about him particularly that kind of made continuing his campaign untenable?
I'm happy to go first, Victoria. I do think we're getting a very notable boomlet of kind of love and adulation for Kamala Harris right now. I don't know how long that's going to last. Maybe it's a sugar high and we're going to crash pretty soon, or maybe she's able to sustain it for something like close to 100 days. That'd be very interesting. I do think there are some real issues the Democratic Party has been grappling with. You saw it in Washington, D.C. Bibi Netanyahu was in Washington, and he addressed Congress, and there were thousands of protesters all over the place. Some of them got a little bit out of control, as I understand it. We're going to see something similar in Chicago at the Democrats' convention there in just about 4 weeks from now. And how does Kamala Harris handle that? That's going to be a moment for her to show leadership. She's going to be the spotlight will be on her, and she's going to have a real challenge, not just over the policy of how closely the U.S. is going to position itself vis-a-vis Israel and how it's pushing for some sort of peace negotiation, but also how does she handle the politics of the young people protesting what her administration is doing? Can she handle that situation? We are going to learn a lot about her when that happens, if not sooner.
Yes. I agree with that, but I think she has been very involved. If you just look at the video of the meetings that Biden has had on the issue, from the day-to-day negotiations, having Netanyahu on the phone or whatever they talk, in the Situation Room when 300 missiles are coming against Israel, and Biden constructed a web of Arab, European, and allied safety net to shoot down. People never believed.
By the way, a
remarkable achievement, Bruce.
A truly remarkable
achievement.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the difference here that Kamala Harris has on the policy is the brutality of what's occurring in Gaza. It's a humanitarian concern. I don't think the issue of Israel's right to defend itself is on the table. And I think she actually will be harder on Netanyahu as to what Israel's performance is in so many people being killed. And I think that will be welcome. I don't think it'll dial it down completely at all, but Biden is now free. And I think he is going to pressure Israel now till his last day in office to make the damn deal and get a ceasefire, get the hostages home, and let's do something for Gaza. So yes, there is absolutely a political threat because of the upheaval to her. They own it, but at the same time, I do think there's flexibility to try and change the course that we're on. Stop the stalemate. Let's make progress.
I just, Bruce, I largely don't disagree with you. I just think there's a high degree of difficulty here on both the policy and the politics. And can she play at the top level? We're going to find out just from this alone, I think.
You're right. The Olympics open this week, and the degree of difficulty is extremely high.
That's right.
Because I think part of where my question came from is we so often talk about second-term seeking presidents having an incumbent advantage, except in Biden's case, it seemed like an incumbent disadvantage because he was kind of bringing in with himself this impression of a bad economy, a poorly performing economy, this impression of, I think I keep quoting this particular poll, but there was a Reuters Ipsos poll that said 80% of Americans think the country is spiraling out of control. He's inheriting all of those kind of feelings amongst the electorate. Do you think, was it that? Was he unpopular because of that kind of legacy, or was it just the age factor? What was the final straw that sort of broke his campaign?
Going into the debate, there was that landscape, and it's really important. I'll come back to that in a moment. But his approval rating was 36%. And no president seeking re-election at 36% has won. And I said that's why there was no path. So I think that was central. But the president knows the economy. She as vice president knows the economy. And given where inflation is and the cost of living, and given the immigration issue, the two hot button issues that Trump has, she has a lot of headwinds in this, notwithstanding the excitement of the past few days.
Yeah, Victoria, if you look at the polling on issues, Biden was losing on almost all of them. Foreign policy, the economy, the border. It's not just the age for him. There's also been the governance. How much, I'm not 100% sure. But I think his unpopularity, if that's the right term, is a complex thing. And Harris, kind of inheriting this, does have some flexibility. Can she keep the same border policy or the same like kind of late in the game maneuver to be tougher on the border that Biden adopted? Can she benefit from a settlement in Gaza? Can she, kind of discharge herself from the baggage of the Afghanistan withdrawal? There were policy reasons why Biden was unpopular. Can she find a way to talk about inflation, which is still impacting the ability of Americans to buy housing and to, kind of start their lives, particularly young people? She's got a chance to do that, but those are also real challenges for her. And so it's not just that Biden was old and people were concerned he couldn't do the job anymore. It's also these difficult policy issues where, frankly, the United States is pretty divided on them. There's no easy answer, but people were not, it was bad enough that people preferred Trump to Biden on those issues. And that should be a little bit alarming for the Democrats.
Yes. One further point on the economy, there's actually been a parallel track between Albanese and President Biden on the economy based on the cost of living pressures and high interest rates. And there now might be a divergence. I expect the Fed to cut interest rates at least once before the election. That will be a boost to Harris. But as you can see in the speculation today, interest rates may go up in Australia, and that's really bad news for the prime minister. So I agree with Lester. I agree with everything that you're saying. The headwinds are strong, and she has to redefine where she is and have people have confidence in that actually she can handle the economy. But it's tough. This is a long way from being over. We have a lot of excitement now. Do we have traction?
We absolutely do have a lot of excitement around Kamala Harris right now. And I think especially from the demographics I'm seeing who are particularly excited, you have young people. And I think that probably speaks into the age difference. And maybe that being Biden's biggest flaw is that people perceived him as too old to do the job well. And now people are enthusiastic about this younger candidate. She plays incredibly well in terms of popular culture spaces. The memes on social media about falling out of a coconut tree and not parliamentarians, congressmen walking around with coconuts kind of like alluding to that. There's a lot of fanfare around her candidacy. But I suppose she also, in personality terms, also has some baggage. It might not be age, but classic criticism we see of her is that what is it that Kamala Harris stands for? And another thing is that so much of the population that needs to be targeted are these the kind of parts of the electorate that benefit more from having a moderate candidate. And I suppose Kamala Harris has cut her teeth on very liberal politics. Like, do you think that's going to be a liability in this election for her, that she's kind of this Californian Democrat who does represent the further left of the Democrat Party?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. She's never really had to persuade voters of a Republican stripe to support her. In my estimation, I mean, she's got some experience for sure, but at this level, trying to win a nationwide election in the United States, you've got to appeal to people who disagree with you on the progressive agenda. If she doesn't do that, she's not going to win. And she hasn't been in a position yet where she's had to do that. I do think she's part of the issue is her public persona. It can be so good and it can be so bad. She's got enormous potential. She's very bright. She's very capable, but she's basically landed like a dud before this week in public. With her original presidential campaign in 2020 did not go very far at all. Should have gone farther. She can have great moments. She can be a great attack. She can be great on the attack and the negative campaign. She can be very effective. Look what she did to Joe Biden on the busing issue in the primary. She changed the conversation. So she can do it, but she's not done it consistently. I think she's got to find a way to kind of combine this kind of nascent but yet unrealized ability to be in the public spotlight and kind of dominate with a positive message, and also appeal to these middle of the road voters who may be skeptical of the progressive agenda. If she can do that, she may do quite well in November, not just win closely, but maybe win by more than a close margin. But again, very, very difficult to do, and she's only got 100 days to do it.
Yeah, she reminds me of another person who was a dud in two presidential runs, and that's Joe Biden. So in 1988 and in 2008, failed miserably. And so the person meets the moment. And in 2020, the highest priority was to beat Trump, stop him, stop his reelection. And I know from being in Colorado and looking at primary day was coming and figuring out who to vote for. I was thinking Michael Bloomberg, for God's sake, just to see would he be best because he had a lot of money and some presence. And so, but I landed on Joe Biden, and everyone landed on Joe Biden, and he was by acclamation after Super Tuesday the nominee. So the issue is what's going to prevail: the inflation and the economy and immigration issues, or is it going to be what's the future of the country? And so anyway, she's meeting this moment, and for all the reasons Lester says, that's the challenge. But I do think it's possible, and we'll have to see. The enthusiasm factor is really important. Trump has so much enthusiasm; they are so amped up, and after the assassination attempt, we're at a new level of commitment by his movement. But she is now improving on the enthusiasm deficit that Biden had. And it was so big among young people, Black people, Latino people. And I think it's coming back. We'll have to see. The debate, I can't believe that Trump actually wants to debate her. But the debate really could be one of those nanosecond explosion moments which changes how people perceive the two candidates. And it's not just reaching, it's really reaching the independent voters and the equivalent of Teals in America. Can she do that? Yeah, she can. Will she? I don't know.
I think that's such an important point, is there is still, 100 days maybe-ish until the election.
Yeah.
And so we do have those additional debates. She's only been in this kind of top position for the Democrats for a number of days. And so I suppose anything can happen in terms of earning the favor of those more Teal-like voters, as you say, Bruce. I did see this morning that she is trailing Trump in every single national and battleground state, including in favorability. So the example of this that I think is particularly pertinent is Pennsylvania. So 42% of likely voters in Pennsylvania said that they had a favorable view of her. 55% said unfavorable, whereas Trump had 46% with a favorable view for Kamala's 42. And when Biden won that state in 2020, 51% had a favorable view of him. And so I think, again, that probably speaks to that kind of moderate appeal that maybe Biden had that perhaps Kamala doesn't have, Bruce.
We'll see. But generally, Trump is under 50%. He has the question, does Trump have a ceiling under 50? And then can she take it? What do you think, Lester?
Yeah, I think so. Interesting. The enthusiasm question, I think, is a little bit of a mirage for the Republicans because Trump's party is pretty narrow. He could have picked Nikki Haley to be his vice presidential running mate, and really
Tim Scott.
Well, not sure Scott would have done it, but okay, I'll accept the premise. But he could have picked someone from the moderate internationalist Chamber of Commerce wing of the party and really kind of sought to expand his base. He didn't do that. He picked a guy that's more Trumpian than he is. J.D. Vance adds nothing to the base of the party. Yes, he's younger. He can talk in complete sentences. He wrote a pretty good book a while ago. Kind of an interesting guy. Disappointing for me on all of the policy issues. There's been no effort to get Republicans like me who are in favor of a robust U.S. role in the world to become part of the party. So while his base is enthusiastic, it's a relatively narrow base. And so this is I think a huge opportunity for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. Make an effort to go reach those voters, those independent, maybe Republican-leaning folks who are a little worried that the two guys in their party lean way too far into the dark side. Can Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, be that person? I personally, he's not on the list at all, so it's not going to happen. I really like Mark Warner, who's the senator in Virginia, was a pretty good business guy back in the day, and also is a good on national security issues and has a very sensible, common sense approach to the world. Would really kind of balance out her progressive stuff with a little more grounded, older viewpoint. So I think the enthusiasm is important, but it's not as important as how broad your base is. And if Trump's going to run this get out the vote, really motivate the base thing, that's what he did in 2020 and he lost. I think that's a losing proposition again. So I think just on the structural issues here, depending on who she picks for vice president, what kind of direction she's going to go in, Democrats could have a real advantage.
Yeah, I know on Vance, from what I can see, he's polling pretty unfavorably. That it's just not. But I think the bigger issue is, since we have an older president who has now left the field and looking at her vice president, Vance is only 39. The last 39-year-old tapped was Richard Nixon by Dwight Eisenhower. He'd been elected to the House in 46 after the war, served 2 terms, and then started a term in the Senate. So he'd been in Washington 6 years. Vance has been in Washington 2 years. Donald Trump is 78 years old. I mean, just think about what the hell is he going to do if he becomes president, on February 2nd, really? And it's scary. So I think that issue can be exploited.
And I think this discussion of JD Vance probably brings me to my next question about who Kamala Harris would. Well, let's assume that Kamala Harris is going to be okay at the convention, but we can come back to a question about whether she'll seal the deal. Who would you advise her to pick as her vice president? If Trump potentially has narrowed his base by appointing someone who looks exactly like him, what kind of advice would you give to Kamala Harris? Where would you look? Lester, you gave some good advice before.
Yeah, I see. So I'll just kind of expand on that a little bit. I think there's been a lot of discussion about these governors in Midwestern states, kind of old Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, even Minnesota. Tim Walz has been mentioned now on some of these lists. The factor that people are ignoring is our national security issues and foreign policy expertise. Harris, with all due respect, doesn't have much. She's never really given a big foreign policy speech. She doesn't have a school of thought she's associated with. She doesn't have hot, prominent experts advising her that are well known. There's some good people with her. I'm not saying they're not good people, but she doesn't have that kind of body of work at the highest levels in public policy on those issues. She could bring someone in as vice president. George W. Bush did this with Dick Cheney. Say what you want about Dick Cheney now. That really strengthened the ticket.
And Obama did it with Biden.
Excellent point. And so I think like Mark Warner, who's a senator, he's the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, very reasonable guy to both parties, has a bunch of friends across the aisle, is the kind of person she needs. So look for that, maybe a little bit older person with some experience in the national security front. That's going to help reach to those middle voters who've got some concerns about the role in the world. And I know Americans don't pick their president based on foreign policy. It's not really a campaign issue. But when it's this close, when it's basically 48 to 48, and whoever can go get that 4% to make the difference in these swing states, that is, foreign policy and national security becomes the kind of issue that can be a real sign of change in the direction things are going to go.
I know this. It's not going to be a woman, okay? It will not be a woman. So that's
Probably
clear. So what do you think of Mark Kelly, Lester? Would he be, he's suddenly become pretty prominent in this speculation.
I'm going to say something that's way too flip. I like him. He seems like a likable guy. I don't think Americans trust people who have been in outer space. There was a senator, Bruce knows this, there was a senator, John Glenn from Ohio, who was a terrific guy, conservative Democrat, had been in outer space, had been a war hero, ran for president and went nowhere. I think because people were like, okay, we like you, not really sure you should be in the Oval Office. All right, so that's kind of a flip answer. But I think he's an appealing candidate. He's likable. His wife, has this amazing story of recovery from a gunshot wound. So could be an interesting candidate. I think he too does not have really that senior level foreign policy experience. So I don't know that it really scratches my itch, but he certainly seems to be the leading candidate right now.
Yeah. I think winning those 4% that you need to win the swing states will ultimately prevail. So I do think Josh Shapiro is probably the front runner. But the other thing, it really to go where Lester wants to go is to tell the governors, God damn it, your job is to win the state for us so that we win. And there's also a factor, you appoint a popular governor and the people in the state don't like that. You're taking my governor away from me. And so that actually could backfire in Pennsylvania. So I think it's a slight factor.
Well, and you go to some of these folks who have been selected for vice president for the state they're from, and then that ticket hasn't won that state, right? Gore wasn't able to win Tennessee when he ran for president himself in 2000. Some of these, it doesn't necessarily work that way anymore. I'm not saying it couldn't. Maybe in the case of Pennsylvania, Shapiro seems pretty good and is interesting for other reasons. But I think better to pick that candidate who kind of rounds you out on the issues and shows undecided voters, hey, I do kind of get what your concerns are. And even though I don't embody them, I pick someone who kind of does. It's a signal. It's about the most important signal a presidential candidate can send right now is who they pick as their running mate.
Yep. Well, I figure we'll know in about 2 weeks.
I think so.
Who it's going to be.
Which brings me to the convention. So far, Harris has basically run unopposed. She has enough delegates to win. I guess there's almost a little bit of deja vu because when it came to Biden seeking a second term, voters weren't happy about it and the party did nothing. And so I wonder, I know there's a calculation with this. And I mean, Dean Phillips, who had his own run against Biden this year, has come out and said, we need more contest. Even if it's just a weak campaign, Kamala Harris needs to be battle tested to prove that she has a strong campaign herself. I mean, do you think there's going to be competition at this convention at all, or is it a done deal? We've got Harris. It's all okay.
I got to say, unless Bruce knows something I don't know, there's going to be no competition. This is pretty much a done deal. The one other comment I'll make is it used to be the Republican Party was the party you said they fall in line with the kind of the chosen leader, whoever's next. That seems to be the Democrats now. I don't see like a lot of dissent inside the party. There's kind of some weird stuff about what the Obamas were doing behind the scenes and the Clintons and all that kind of stuff. Who knows? But there's no like kind of groundswell for Gavin Newsom to come out and be the alternative or Gretchen Whitmer or something. So this, I think this is done. She's raised a ton of money. Who can raise the amount of money she's raised already? Plus she got the Biden war chest. So she's in the hundreds of millions of dollars now, which is a big deal because the Democrats were behind on fundraising. Now they're not. She's going to run away with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But if you just look back over the 3 weeks that led to Biden standing aside, again, the calculation was he had to. And then looking at people were agonizing as late as the day before Biden stood aside as to should there be a process, what would it look like? But the hardheads in the party, and I put Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer in that category, realized that there was no road to do that. And they made statements before Biden. I mean, everyone believed until the moment Biden said, I'm leaving, that he wasn't going to leave. He was dug in on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, at least as far as public perceptions were concerned. So they had made statements in the week before saying, I'm not going to run. And so actually, it isn't like we should have a contest in the best person. I think people feel they have the best person. And again, for that basic objective of stopping Trump. Given everything right now, she is our best hope. And so I think it's a manufactured issue at this stage.
Wait, do you mean to tell me that Michelle Obama's not going to make a run? Is that not what's happening? Oh my gosh, those rumors.
I denied that 12 times over the course of the past year.
Pretty sure she wrote it in her memoir. Pretty sure she said, I have no interest in politics, written in the memoir. I actually saw that her spokesperson has been releasing the same statement that she was releasing in 2012 saying, I'm not running again. So
I don't think she wanted her husband to run for president, much less herself run for president. She doesn't seem interested at all.
Exactly. But you know something? She's going to campaign for Harris. And let's think about this for a moment. And it really gets to how much strength. And as someone who knows foreign policy and the military so well, Lester, I mean, you're going to have 3 presidents and the vice president, the 4 people of the apocalypse on the field to win. We haven't had that before. I mean, you're going to have Clinton, Obama, and Biden out there every week campaigning, and she's out there, and that is an army, and it's really something. And then yet Michelle Obama, sure, yeah. And note, by the way, contrast that with the lack of other Republican star power at the convention that weren't related to Trump or selected by him. Even Lindsey Graham wasn't there. There were a lot, Nikki Haley came and kind of did her speech, her perfunctory speech, some of the other rivals from the primary, but the old establishment, there were no Bushes there. It's all Trump's party now, and he's kind of dispensed with the rest of the structure.
But there was Hulk Hogan. So there was star power. It just
he almost won me.
I have to say, I didn't think, if you would have told me a few years ago that Hulk Hogan would do a much better job at a convention than Clint Eastwood, I would say you're crazy. But boy, he was so much better.
Maybe what the Democrats need is just an Obama like tearing open their shirt and it says like Kamala Harris 2024 underneath.
No. What Kamala Harris needs is Taylor Swift, and I'm serious about that.
Yeah.
That's actually very true. Yeah. All right. I might bring us to our final question and then I'll ask for your by the numbers stat. Let's say it's the end of the election. Democrats have lost and they're rifling through, the last 12 months trying to see what was the cause. Who's to blame if Democrats lose in November?
Bruce, I'm going to defer to you.
That's a live grenade. I have to throw myself on it. I think people will blame Biden for not, a couple things here. Biden for not deciding 2 years ago what he decided last week. And I think that's really, really significant. The headwinds were strong, but headwinds are strong everywhere. And which brings us to Biden's legacy. If the Democrats win, then Biden's legacy stands. If Kamala Harris loses, then Biden becomes a failed one-term president, and Trump comes in and will dismantle everything that he did, and that will be the end. So he will be in the same category as Jimmy Carter, and that'll be it. And that would be a shame. So I think I think the postmortem while we're all still breathing is, he should have left right after the midterms of 2022. That would have changed the course of history here.
Yeah, I don't think I can disagree. Biden, came very close to having a fatal case of hubris here, and he kind of dodged the missile there at the very end. Maybe, and if Harris loses, they'll say he did it too late. He had the idea 4 years ago, I'll be the bridge to the next generation, but I need to be the one to stop Trump. That made a lot of sense to a lot of people. He did seem to have forgotten it. He thinks he's got to, he talked about finishing the job before he pulled out. It's really for Harris to finish the job, I think.
Yeah. The trade-off, though, would have been a lame duck at that stage, which meant that things like Ukraine aid and other stuff might have been compromised. It's a tough balance. But I think we'll just know on November 6th exactly what happens here. We live in such a different world where things happen so fast on so many platforms that actually you can change the polarity of something overnight. And so that's why there may not be such a drag on Harris for his delay in reaching the future. So, but here we are. If you ask me who's going to win, I can't tell you, Victoria. I don't know.
Well, maybe I'll ask you this. Do you have a by the numbers number of the week that's relevant to the things that we've talked about?
So I'll jump in. I think we talked about this earlier. I think the thing that people are going to focus on in U.S. politics for the next few weeks, maybe the whole way, is Trump's ceiling. It is relatively low. He at most is going to get 47 or 48% of the national vote. Of course, it's going to be these swing states that matter: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina. But he does have the ceiling of how much support he's going to get. He can't really change that. We've seen that for the last 10 years or so. And that's going to be the opportunity for Kamala Harris. Can she go get the full 52 that she could be entitled to in this race? Can she make the tough political decisions to get that support? That's what I'm going to be watching.
Brace.
I agree with that. And my number is 45. She's got to get her approval rating up to 45. So we'll see from where it is now and over the next few weeks and months, into September. Is that moving up or is that stuck? And if it's moving up, that means she has a fighting chance.
I'm going to throw in my own, which is 78, which is the age Trump will be if he is inaugurated in January, which will make him the oldest president to ever have been inaugurated. So bringing it back full circle to the age question is an interesting piece of symmetry there. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. 100 days to go. I'm sure we'll all be very busy in the coming days. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria. Thanks, Lester.
Thanks, Bruce. Good to see you.
Thanks, everyone. As we wrap up, I'd like to point out a couple of other podcasts that might be of interest. Our CEO, Dr. Michael Green, is co-host of the Asia Chessboard podcast with Jude Blanchett, the Freeman Chair of the China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I'd also recommend checking out the USSC Live podcast series that runs a recording from our major events, including our Election Watch 2024 series. You can find these on our website, ussc.edu.au, or wherever you get your